The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, recapping Chapter 4, the Carew murder case. A maid is gazing from her window, feeling very happy about life, when she sees a handsome older man walk past. From the other direction, she sees Hyde, who she recognises from previous visits to her house. The older man attempts a pleasant, friendly conversation with Hyde, who is clearly impatient with this, before suddenly bursting out into a frenzied attack onto the man, whom he clubs to death. Utterson is called, as he is the lawyer of the dead man, who turns out to be an MP, Sir Danvers Carew. He and a policeman then take a cab to Hyde's house in Soho, for which he had the address after their earlier encounter in Chapter 2. The surroundings of the house are poor and wretched. A housekeeper, apparently evil but looking quite polite, answers the door and seems happy to hear Hyde is wanted by the police. When they go inside, the house is well furnished and full of Jekyll's taste of decoration, albeit ransacked quite recently, clearly by Hyde. They use some cheque stubs to check his bank account and find a sizable amount of money stored away, further hinting at the idea of blackmail. This is Mr. Hyde's exit from the story until we see him dead at the end of Chapter 8. We see a more extreme form of his violent behaviour than we saw in Chapter 1. The focus on impatience and the image of the great flame of anger portray a man unwilling or unable to deal with social niceties. And the collection of verbs used to describe the attack are quite shocking in their violence. The descriptions of him as a madman and ape-like are further nods towards that fear of devolution in Victorian society, as well as a dismissal of violence, quite possibly, that violence that turns out to be actually a natural part of humanity later on. The horrific details of the murder, the bones shattering audibly and the body jumping from the power of the beating, makes this seem violence beyond our imagining. That the maid had initially disliked Hyde from earlier encounters backs up the general impression we've seen, while further highlighting the judgments the Victorians seem to make on appearance. And that image of deformity is once again repeated, and in this case shared by many. The oxymoron of the housemaid's reaction, odious joy, seems to further this general impression, whilst either suggesting Hyde employed an unpleasant housemaid deliberately, or that he has had that effect on those he is around. This is the only appearance of Sir Danvers Carew, and he really only represents a kind of inoffensive Victorian politeness. Although, from what we know, there may well be more under the surface. After all, he and Hyde do appear to have a prearranged meeting. Now, the reference to old world kindness may well be a part of Stevenson highlighting that this is a time of change, and maybe that is Danvers' real purpose, to show the dangers of the changes that are happening in society and the way that old world kindness is being lost. Now, this chapter is packed with symbolism. Firstly, although the attack takes place in the night, Stevenson makes clear that the scene is fully lit, albeit naturally by a full moon. There is a practical purpose for this, of course. The maid needs to see what's going on. But like the trampling, we could say that the light is revealing the truth of Hyde's, or even society's, evil. On the later journey to Hyde's house, the poetic description of the beautiful twilight does also place us halfway between the light and the dark, between possibly the truth and the concealment. It's in this chapter that the fog makes its first real appearance, although only after the murder, as though it is coming down to, like the twilight, make things unclear. The description of it as a pall, a cloak used for covering a dead body, seems to be used to suggest the death of heaven, as though the impact of the murder is much wider than the people we see. Hyde and Carew are clearly presented as binary opposites, although it is worth noting that that is from the perspective of the maid. Appearances again? And the episode at Hyde's house seems to illuminate that conflict between his Hyde-like violence, as represented by the drinking, poverty and prostitution around the place, and the Jekyll tastefulness of the inside. Seems the two are not as different as we might think. Doors come back again. In this case, there's a doorway with many ragged children huddled around, and like tramps around the door in the first chapter, it seems to suggest that something is being shut off for them. The description of Soho, the surroundings of Hyde's house, can be seen as Stevenson briefly revealing the sadness of the living conditions of many of the poor inhabitants of London. The gin palace, gin was the cheap drink of the masses, uses the term palace ironically. And the reminder of the love of violence in the popularity of the penny numbers, which were one-page sheets depicting real-life crimes as pictorial stories, is juxtaposed with the child poverty that's on display. It's interesting that the fog lifts for this scene as though revealing this. Finally, the women surely must be a euphemism for those driven to prostitution to survive as they come to London from elsewhere. The details of the key in hand suggest maybe they're always ready to start work again, and their need for morning drinking could seem like just numbing their suffering.